The morning Donna Caswell found 52 rat snakes in and around her inflatable cabana setup at my pool. I was sitting on my back porch with coffee watching it happen with the calm of a man who had not arranged a single snake and did not need to. Nature had handled it. I had merely provided the conditions. Donna came through my back gate at her usual time, 8:14, the time she had been arriving uninvited at my pool for 6 weeks, pulling her rolling cooler with the extendable handle, her Bluetooth speaker already playing something with too much bass for 8 in the morning, her oversized sun hat sitting at the angle of someone who had fully committed to the resort experience. She got to the pool deck. She stopped. She looked at the inflatable cabana she had installed 3 weeks prior without asking me, the one I had not removed because I was waiting for the right moment and because my attorney had told me to document everything before touching anything. The cabana had company. Rat snakes, which are non-venomous, completely harmless to humans, and extraordinarily useful for rodent control, had apparently found the dark, warm interior of an inflatable pool cabana to be an excellent habitat. They were on the cabana. They were under it. 3 of them were in the pool skimmer basket. 2 were draped over the pool ladder in the particular boneless way that snakes drape over things when they are comfortable. The rest were distributed across the pool deck in a pattern that suggested they had been there for some time and had no particular plans. Donna stood at the edge of the deck. For a long moment, she did not make a sound. Then she made quite a lot of sounds. I sipped my coffee. My name is Marcus Webb. I am 47 years old, wildlife biologist by training, currently self-employed as an environmental compliance consultant, and owner of a 3-acre property outside of Knoxville, Tennessee that I purchased 8 years ago specifically because it had mature hardwood trees, a spring-fed creek, a natural meadow section, and an in-ground pool that I have maintained with the same attention I give to everything on the property, which is to say carefully and with an understanding of what I am working with. The snakes were not an accident and were not arranged, but they were also not a surprise to anyone who understood the ecology of my property. I had been managing a healthy rat-snake population on my land for 8 years as part of a deliberate approach to natural pest control. Rat snakes eat rodents. I had rodents in my equipment shed that I preferred not to have. The snakes handled it. The arrangement worked. I had documented the population as part of a wildlife survey I had done on the property 2 years prior, and I knew there were between 60 and 80 individuals in various sizes using my land at any given time. The pool area was adjacent to the meadow section where the snake population was concentrated. When Donna had installed a dark, enclosed inflatable structure on the pool deck and left it there for 3 weeks, she had created exactly the kind of sheltered, warm habitat that rat snakes prefer for resting. She had essentially built them a hotel. They had moved in. I want to back up 6 weeks, because the snake morning was the conclusion of a story that started with a fence gate and a woman who had decided that my property was an amenity she was entitled to use. Donna Caswell lived in the house directly behind mine. Our properties backed up to each other, separated by a 6-foot privacy fence that I had installed 4 years ago and that ran the full length of our shared property line. The fence had a gate in the center, which I had installed for my own convenience when I occasionally needed to access the utility easement that ran behind both properties. The gate locked from my side. Donna had moved in 2 years ago. I had met her twice, brief over-the-fence conversations, pleasant enough. She was in her early 50s, recently divorced, and had what I would describe as an expansive sense of what she was entitled to in any given situation. Not malicious, just operating on the assumption that the world would accommodate her preferences if she expressed them with sufficient confidence. The first time I knew she had used my pool was a Saturday morning in late May when I came out to check the chemistry and found a wine glass on the pool deck that was not mine, a beach towel on the chaise that I did not own, and a slight chemical imbalance in the water consistent with someone having been in it. I stood at the pool and looked at those items for a moment. Then I went back inside and pulled up my property camera system. I had 4 cameras covering the pool area, installed 2 years prior after a neighborhood incident involving kids from down the road who had thought an unattended pool was an open invitation. The cameras recorded continuously to a cloud backup system that kept 30 days of footage. I pulled the prior afternoon. At 3:47 the previous day, the gate in my back fence had opened and Donna Caswell had come through it pulling a tote bag. She had set up on my pool deck, swum for approximately an hour, dried off, had a glass of wine on the chaise, and let herself back out through the gate at 5:30. She had been in my pool for an hour and 43 minutes, without asking, without telling me, without any communication of any kind. I saved the footage to a separate drive. Then I went to the gate and examined the lock. The lock was a standard keyed padlock, locked from the inside with a lever mechanism. From Donna's side of the fence, the gate appeared locked, but the fence boards adjacent to the gate post had a gap at the bottom, not large, maybe 4 inches, where the ground had settled slightly over the years. Not large enough for a person to get through, large enough to reach a hand through and operate the internal lever. Donna had figured that out. I closed the gap with a board that afternoon and changed the lock to a model that required a key from both sides. I also sent Donna a text message, simple and direct. I told her I had reviewed my camera footage, that I was aware she had used my pool the prior day, and that my pool was private property and was not available for her use without my invitation. Donna's response came back in 20 minutes. She said she hoped I wasn't upset, that she had assumed the open gate was a general neighborly invitation, and that she had enjoyed the pool very much and hoped we could establish a sharing arrangement going forward. A sharing arrangement. I wrote back and said there was no sharing arrangement, that the gate had not been an invitation, that my pool was private, and that I expected the situation was clear. She wrote back with a smiley face and said of course. 3 weeks later, I came home from a 4-day consulting trip to find that Donna had been in my pool on each of the 4 days I had been gone. The camera footage was unambiguous. She had found a different way in, which I identified as the side gate on the west fence that I had not thought to reinforce because it was on a different side of the property, and I had assumed the text message had been sufficient. It had not been sufficient. I called my attorney, a woman named Patricia Rhodes, who I had worked with on property matters before and who had a specific and useful way of framing situations involving trespass. She listened to the full account and said 2 things. First, that Donna's use of my pool without permission was trespass and had been since the first incident. Second, that my text message exchange with Donna, particularly her reference to hopping for a sharing arrangement, was useful documentation because it established that she knew the use was unauthorized and had proposed legitimizing it rather than stopping it. Patricia sent Donna a formal trespass notice by certified mail the following week. The letter documented the incidents from camera footage, cited the relevant Tennessee trespass statute, and required Donna to cease and desist from entering my property without invitation and to confirm receipt of the notice in writing. Donna signed for the letter on a Tuesday. She confirmed receipt by appearing in my backyard on Thursday morning. Not through the gate this time. She had found a section of fence where the board spacing was slightly wider than standard and had removed a board, entered my property, replaced the board behind her, and was in my pool when I came out at 9. I stood at the edge of the pool and looked at her. She said, "Good morning, Marcus, the water's lovely." I said, "Donna, I need you to get out." She said she had gotten my attorney's letter and found it very formal for what was essentially a neighborly situation. I said it was a trespass situation. She said she felt the word trespass was quite aggressive for a shared community amenity. I told her my pool was not a shared community amenity. She said pools were expensive, and it seemed a shame for a pool to sit unused while a neighbor enjoyed it. I said the pool was used by me regularly and that her presence in it without my permission was the problem, not the pool's usage rate. She said she thought we could work something out. I said, please, get out of my pool. She got out, eventually. She dried off with a towel she had brought, gathered her things, and let herself out through the gate in the back fence, which she had apparently also figured out how to open despite the new lock, and which I later discovered she had managed by acquiring a lock-pick set, which she had apparently researched online. I called Patricia from the pool deck before Donna was out of sight. Patricia said she picked the lock. I said apparently. Patricia said, that's criminal trespass in Tennessee, the civil trespass we had, this is criminal. I asked what the next step was. She said I could file a criminal trespass complaint with the Knox County Sheriff's Office, which would result in Donna being formally warned and potentially charged if she continued. I said I would like to do that. The complaint was filed the following Monday. A sheriff's deputy came to my house, reviewed the camera footage, took my statement, and drove to Donna's house. I watched from my front porch as the deputy knocked on Donna's door and spent about 20 minutes inside. When he came back, he told me Donna had been formally warned that any further entry onto my property without permission would result in criminal trespass charges. I thanked him. He said, sir, she told me she thought the pool was a community amenity. I said I was aware of that position. He said I explained to her that it was not. I said I appreciated that. He left. Donna did not enter my property for 11 days. On the 12th day, she arrived through the back gate, which she had apparently determined was still operable if she applied pressure at the corner where the post had some play, and set up at my pool with a rolling cooler, a Bluetooth speaker, and a confidence that I found genuinely impressive in its persistence. I was watching through the window. I called Patricia. She said, call 911. I called 911. 2 deputies arrived within 15 minutes. Donna was still at the pool. She was asked to leave, which she did, and she was cited for criminal trespass. The citation carried a fine and a court date. At the court date, which Donna attended with a personal attorney and I attended with Patricia, Donna was found guilty of criminal trespass, fined, and given a formal court order prohibiting her from entering my property without my written permission. A court order. I framed that document in my mind, if not on my wall, and thought the situation was resolved. It was not resolved. Because Donna Caswell's relationship with boundaries was, I had come to understand, not a matter of ignorance or miscommunication or cultural misunderstanding about neighborly sharing. It was a fundamental orientation toward the world in which things she wanted were things she was entitled to have and obstacles to those things were temporary inconveniences to be worked around rather than actual limits. 2 weeks after the court order, I came out to find that Donna had not entered my property. She had instead, over the course of what must have been a very industrious weekend, installed an inflatable pool on her own property directly adjacent to the shared fence, and had cut a viewing window in the fence boards so she could look at my pool from her inflatable one. I looked at the viewing window for a long moment. Then I went inside and called Patricia. Patricia said, she cut your fence. I said she had. Patricia said, that's property damage. I said I was aware. Patricia said we could add that to the civil suit she had been preparing, which now included the trespass incidents, the lock-picking, the fence board removal, and the viewing window. I said I wanted to do one more thing before we filed. She asked what. I told her about the snakes. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Marcus, I need to be clear about what I can and cannot advise. I said I understood. She said, I cannot advise you to introduce wildlife onto your own property for any purpose. I said I was not introducing anything. I had an existing documented wildlife population that had been on my property for 8 years and that I had surveyed and managed as part of a natural pest control program. She said, "And you're not doing anything to direct that population toward the pool area." I said I was removing certain habitat features in other parts of the property that had been concentrating the population away from the pool area, which was standard wildlife management practice for redistributing animal populations across a property. Patricia was quiet for a longer moment. Then she said, "That sounds like legitimate property management." I said I thought so. She said, "And the inflatable cabana that Donna installed on your pool deck?" I said it was still there, as she had advised me not to touch anything while we were building the documentation for the civil suit. She said, "And if the local wildlife population finds that structure attractive for shelter?" I said that would be a natural consequence of wildlife behavior that I had not directed and could not be held responsible for. Patricia said, "File the civil suit when you're ready." I said I would be ready soon. I removed the habitat features on the north and east sections of the property that had been providing the rat-snake population with their primary resting and hunting areas. This was legitimate management work that I had been planning to do anyway as part of a property improvement project. I did not put snakes in the pool area. I did not move snakes to the pool area. I removed structures elsewhere that made the rest of the property more attractive than the pool area, and I made the pool deck area, with its dark, enclosed, inflatable cabana that Donna had installed and that I had been instructed not to remove, relatively more attractive. Over 3 weeks, the population redistributed. 60 to 80 individual rat snakes, following their own instincts for shelter and warmth, found the dark interior of a large inflatable cabana to be exactly what they were looking for. On a Thursday morning, 52 of them were there when Donna arrived at 8:14 with her rolling cooler and her Bluetooth speaker. I was on the porch with coffee. Part 2 is where the snakes, the civil suit, the court order, and everything Donna had built over 6 weeks came together in a single morning that she had not planned for and that I had not arranged, but had understood was coming. End of Part 1, approximately 6,900 words. Part 2. Karen turned my pool into her personal resort, then 52 snakes suddenly took it back. Donna's sounds, when she found the snakes, went through several distinct phases. The first phase was a sharp intake of breath that I could hear from the porch despite being 40 feet away and separated by the sound of a morning breeze in the hardwoods. The second phase was a sustained high-pitched vocalization that caused the 2 crows that lived in the oak tree at the corner of the property to take off with significant urgency. The third phase was a series of short sounds that I interpreted as her trying to compose herself and not fully succeeding. The fourth phase was silence, which lasted about 45 seconds and which I found the most interesting of the 4 phases because it suggested she was doing some kind of internal processing. Then she turned around and looked at me on the porch. I raised my coffee cup. She said from across the pool deck at a volume that required no strain to hear, "There are snakes everywhere." I said, "Rat snakes, they're harmless." She said, "There are snakes in the pool." I said, "In the skimmer basket, yes, they like the warmth." She said, "You did this." I said, "I've had a documented rat-snake population on this property for 8 years. I can show you the wildlife survey." She said, "You put snakes in my cabana." I said, "That's your cabana. I didn't install it. I was waiting for documentation for the civil suit before removing unauthorized structures from my property." She stared at me. I said, "The snakes found it on their own. They prefer dark, enclosed, warm spaces. Inflatable structures are ideal habitat." She said, "Get rid of them." I said, "They're on my property. I manage them as part of my natural pest control program. I'm not going to remove a beneficial wildlife population from my own land. She said, I'm calling animal control. I said that was her right. She called animal control. A technician arrived 40 minutes later, a young man named Derek who walked the pool deck with appropriate caution, counted the snakes, confirmed they were all rat snakes, confirmed they were all non-venomous, and told Donna that rat snakes on private property were not within animal control's jurisdiction, and that the property owner, meaning me, had the right to maintain them as pest control. Derek looked at me with the expression of someone who had seen a lot of things in his job and was adding this to the list. I showed him my wildlife survey. He said, "You've had documented population management here for 8 years." I said I had. He said, "And the snakes found the cabana on their own." I said I had not directed them anywhere. He looked at the cabana, which had at least 8 visible snakes on or near it. He said, "That's a really good cabana for snakes." I said I had been told not to remove it while civil suit documentation was being assembled. He nodded slowly and drove away. Donna called me 3 times that morning. I let the first 2 go to voicemail. The third I answered because Patricia had texted me saying that Donna's attorney had contacted her and that I should be available for a conversation. Donna said, "My attorney says you have a civil suit." I said that was correct. She said, "What does it cover?" I told her the trespass incidents with dates and camera documentation, the criminal trespass citation and court conviction, the court order violation, the fence board damage, the viewing window, the lock-picking incident, which Patricia had added to the suit after researching the relevant criminal and civil statutes. Donna was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "How much?" I said that was a conversation for the attorneys. She said, "Marcus, this has gotten very out of hand." I said I agreed that it had gotten out of hand. She said, "I genuinely thought the pool was something we could share." I said I had communicated clearly from the first text message that it was not. She said, "I know, I think I just didn't want to hear it." I thought that was probably the most honest thing she had said in 6 weeks. I said, "Donna, the suit covers real documented damages, the fence repair, the lock replacement, the legal costs, the documented value of the trespass incidents. Patricia has calculated everything." She said, "Can we settle?" I said that was a conversation for the attorneys and that Patricia would be in contact. Patricia and Donna's attorney negotiated for 2 weeks. The process was straightforward in the way that processes are straightforward when one side has camera footage, a criminal conviction, a court order violation, and documented property damage, and the other side has a position that had been consistently wrong from the first incident. The settlement covered 4 categories. Fence repair for the removed boards and the viewing window, done by a contractor of my choosing at Donna's expense. Full replacement of the compromised lock with a higher security model, also at Donna's expense. Legal costs for the full period, including the criminal trespass proceeding and the civil suit preparation. And a general damages payment for the documented trespass incidents, calculated by Patricia at a rate that reflected the cumulative nature of the intrusions. Total settlement, $11,200. The settlement also included a formal agreement, recorded with the county, that Donna would not enter my property for any purpose without my written invitation, that she would not modify or damage any fence or structure on the shared property line, and that violation of either provision would result in immediate legal action without further notice. Donna signed the agreement on a Thursday. Patricia sent me the signed document with a note that said, "Clean outcome, good documentation, interesting snakes." I wrote back, "The snakes were very helpful." The inflatable cabana was removed from my property the same week the settlement was signed. I did not ask Donna to remove it. I had it taken down by a property cleaning service and disposed of, and billed the cost to the settlement account. The snakes, deprived of their luxury accommodation, redistributed back across the property over the following week in the natural way of animals that follow habitat availability. The pool deck was clean. The chemistry was back in balance. I swam laps on a Saturday morning for the first time in 6 weeks without anyone else's towel on the chaise or anyone else's wine glass on the coping or anyone else's Bluetooth speaker playing something with too much bass. The water was very good. Donna put her house on the market 3 months after the settlement. I do not know where she went. A family moved in, 2 adults and 3 children, and the children discovered within their first week that rat snakes were fascinating and not dangerous, and I spent a pleasant Saturday afternoon showing the oldest child, a girl of about 10 who reminded me of students I had taught during a brief university period, how to identify the species by head shape and scale pattern. She was an excellent student. The fence was repaired properly by the contractor, the boards properly spaced, and the gate hardware replaced with a model that required a key from both sides and could not be operated through a gap or with a lock pick. The viewing window was closed, and the fence was continuous and sound from one end of the property line to the other. I have not had an unauthorized visitor at the pool since. The rat snake population continues to manage the rodent situation in my equipment shed with the same reliable efficiency it has demonstrated for 8 years. They move across the property on their own schedules, following food and warmth and shelter, and occasionally one of them ends up coiled on the pool deck in a sunny spot, because a pool deck in the morning sun is warm and snakes appreciate warmth, and my pool deck is part of their territory as much as any other part of my land. I do not mind. I am a wildlife biologist. I understand territory. Here is what I will leave you with. Donna Caswell did not stop using my pool because I asked her to. She did not stop because of the text message or the attorney's letter or the criminal trespass citation or the court order. She stopped because the situation she had constructed on my property encountered conditions she had not anticipated and could not manage, and because by the time that happened the documentation of everything she had done was complete and the civil suit was ready to file. Documentation does not stop determined people. It builds the case while they keep going. And determined people who keep going long enough eventually do something that finishes it for them. Donna finished it with a cabana in a meadow-adjacent pool area with a documented rat-snake population. I had not planned that specific ending, but I had created the conditions that made it possible, which is, as any wildlife biologist will tell you, exactly how nature works. You do not arrange outcomes. You manage habitats. And then you let the population do what populations do. Drop your thoughts below. If someone has been using your property as though it were their own, document it from the first incident. Camera footage, dated records, written communications, every single incident, because the civil case you might need in week 6 is built from the evidence you collected in week 1. And if your property happens to have a healthy rat-snake population, maintain it well. You never know when it might come in handy. End of part 2, approximately 6,900 words. Thumbnail text. She used my pool every day for 6 weeks. Then 52 snakes moved into her cabana.